Hello.
Hello, Vice Chair Vasquez. We can hear you.
Okay, good. Just sound check.
Howdy, Geronimo.
I'm traveling, but I'll be in my destination in like 2 minutes. So I'll be off before we get into our meeting.
All right, good, good. And I see that I heard, I think Judy Begay, she was on.
I'm here.
All right, Judy. And I don't see, oh, there's Lena. I see Lena on.
Hi, Madam Chair, I'm here.
All right, very good. And do we have where's Waldo? Do we have a Matt?
No, we do not have Supervisor Ryan at this time.
All right. Well, hopefully he's on his way. It's been a busy day.
Okay, Chair Horseman, we do have all the supervisors.
All right. I love that. And it is almost, we got about 30 seconds. All right, I think we're there. So welcome members of the board and our Coconino County staff and wonderful members of our public. Today is Tuesday, August 8th, 2023. We're here for a regular session of the Coconino County Board of Supervisors. And before we get started, I think we just have to acknowledge that the board, all 5 of us, as well as some of our staff, Deputy County Manager and Gregory and Keith, and some others were able to join us today for the wonderful visit from President Biden. We were there in the shadows of Red Butte, which is the birthplace of the Havasupai peoples. And we're there as the president declared the new Baj Navjo Itakveni Grand Canyon National Monument. And was a wonderful day today. And the board was up early and will be up late tonight for our short-term rental public hearing. But it was really one of those historic and wonderful days. And just want to acknowledge that and want to thank so many people in our community and certainly my colleagues and folks here at the Coconino County that have for so long supported the protection of the Grand Canyon and to forever keep it free from uranium mining. So it's a good day. It's going to be a good evening. Thank you for joining us. And our first order of business is the call to order. And my name is Patrice Horstman. I am the chair of the Board of Supervisors, and I'm the supervisor for District 1, where most of today's activities occurred and encompasses a great swath of what is now the new Grand Canyon National Monument. District 2.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Geronimo Vasquez. I'm supervisor for District 2 and current vice chair. Thank you for being here tonight.
District 3.
Matt Ryan, District 3. Happy to be here. Hello, everybody.
And District 4.
Hi, everyone. My name is Judy B. Gay, District 4 Board of Supervisor. Welcome.
And District 5.
Good afternoon, good evening. This is Lena.
Thank you, Supervisor Fowler. And we are moving on to our next order of business, and that is the Pledge of Allegiance. And this is our time to be able to honor our great country through the Pledge of Allegiance. And with that, I'm going to ask those that can to please stand. Let's say the Pledge of Allegiance, and our clerk will put the flag and the pledge here on our screen. So please. You're going to put it up, or should we just go forward? Are you, Lindsay, are you there? Here we go.
Sorry, I'm here. My
Uh-huh.
computer's a little slow.
All right, no problem. So here we go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the
And to the
republic
republic
for which it
which
stands,
stands
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty
liberty,
and justice for all. All right. And our next order of business is called to the public. Now, members of the board and members of our community, we are going to have an open public hearing on our short-term rental, but this is the time for members of our public to be able to address the board, ask any questions, or make comments on matters that are not on the agenda. As I said, we will have a public hearing on our short-term rental, proposed short-term rental ordinance, and we will then acknowledge members of the public. So these are for matters that are not currently on the agenda that you may have questions or comments about. And members of the public, we ask that you, of course, remain respectful. This is an open public meeting. And our clerk, Lindsay Daly, who's going to tell you how you can join us at tonight's meeting. So Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Chair Horstman. At this time, if there is anyone that would like to speak during the call to the public, you can hit the raise hand icon that will appear at the bottom of your screen if you hover towards the bottom. It looks like a hand. If you click on that, that will raise your hand and notify us that you would like to speak. If you've joined us by telephone, you can hit *9 on your phone, and that will raise your hand and notify us that you would like to speak. And if you can, please state your name and address for our minutes, and we will set a timer for the 3 minutes for speaking. And Chair Horseman, I do have a hand up. Let me see who this is. Ron Huntley. Ron, I will go ahead and allow you to speak. So you'll just need to unmute.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
All right, Ron, thanks for joining us this evening. And would you please state your name and your address here? And thanks for joining us.
Ron Huntley, P.O. Box 50314, Parks, Arizona.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Okay, the reason I am here tonight is about 1.5 years ago, 2 of my neighbors put up spotlights on each side of our road out in Parks. I spoke with code enforcement, and code enforcement told me they can't enforce because they have no spectrometer. So I asked about, in lighting ordinance 17.6 subsection E, direct lighting on site, which states all light fixtures except street lamps shall be aimed or shielded so that direct illumination shall be confined to the property boundaries of the source as much as is feasible. Also, subsection F, direct lighting off roadways. All light fixtures except street lamps shall be installed in such a way that the direct illumination does not fall onto any public or private street or road as much as is feasible. And code enforcement told me that he will not ask them to take the lights or move the lights down because the last 3 words or 4 words, as much as is feasible, are in those 2 sections. And so my question is it code enforcement's job to go out, collect evidence, and then take this before a judge or cite the person, or even ask the person, cite to the person, here's what we have, and do you believe that it's feasible to point these lights not directly in the roadway? My question to you.
And Ron, as you know, this is public comment, and unfortunately, the law does not allow us to discuss items on public comment. But I will do this: I will ask that this matter be turned over to our deputy county manager to take a look at and to answer your questions. And we appreciate you bringing this to our attention. And Ron, could you go ahead and send Andy, can you give him your email address? And if you could send your contact information, we'll have somebody from the county get back to you.
I sent everything to Matt Ryan, and he sent everything, Jennifer sent everything back to code enforcement 3 weeks ago and asked for a response, and we have not received a response. I would also like to say that the code enforcement is working on a new light code right now, and he says that these lights are going to be permanent once the new lighting code comes in, because they'll be grandfathered in. So we'll have to drive through these lights. And also, I know that, and I know that this isn't an isolated instance with with the people on the roads. It's a very difficult thing, and we've tried for 3 years to get this taken care of, and it just has not happened. So, moving forward, I think if we could all get together and get some enforceable code, because either the code's not enforceable or it's in the interpretation of it's not enforceable. But yes, I would like to hear from your deputy director.
Yes.
Good. Thank you, Chair Horseman. Good afternoon, Ron. This is Andy Burleson. I'm your deputy county manager. I am in communication with Supervisor Ryan and as well as his district director, Jen Hammond. And so I'll be following up with Mark Stento, our code enforcement officer, as well as Jay Christeman, our community development director. They're actually on the call as well. We're going to be talking about short-term rentals this evening for our public hearing. So we'll be following up and get a meeting scheduled with you. So thank you for your comments. Really appreciate it.
Okay, so you will contact me, Andy?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And thank you all very much.
Absolutely. Have a good evening. Thanks for bringing this to our attention. Appreciate it very
Okay.
much.
Bye-bye.
All right, members of the public, again, this is your time for public comment. And as I said, this is items that are not on the agenda. And so we cannot discuss them today, but we certainly can ask that our staff take a look at this and get back with you and/or put it on a follow-up board meeting for further discussion of the board. So with that, members of the public, it is your time. We will be talking about short-term rental here in a little while. We would ask that you wait for your comments on that during the public meeting. So other items not on the agenda, now would be your time to address the board.
And again, you can hit the raise hand icon that looks like a hand. I do have a hand up, Gretchen. I'm going to go ahead and allow to speak. If you could state your name and address, and we will start the clock for 3 minutes once after you do that. You'll just need to unmute, Gretchen.
Got it. Gretchen Slover, 3588 Huron in Flagstaff, 86005. I just have a question, and I wanted to know how the board is addressing voter fraud.
Gretchen, that, I think that, again, this is not on the agenda, so we can't really have a discussion of the board. On the other hand, we have had meetings with the board where we have received updates from Esler Musta, our assistant county manager, and also elections director, and we will continue to have those moving forward. If you have any specific questions or comments or concerns, please put them in writing, and I would request that you get them addressed to Esler, and I know he'll respond to you. But
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I put it in writing twice, but I didn't send anything to Esler yet, so I will do that. Thank you.
I appreciate it very much. Thanks for joining us this
You're
evening.
welcome.
All right, other members of the public?
I do have Robert with a hand up. Robert, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak. If you can state your name and address for the record. And just unmute yourself.
Hi, Robert, we see you, but you need to unmute and go ahead and give us your name and your address.
Okay, my name is Robert McKissick. I live at 6161 Camden Road. And recently in the last month, our neighborhood has experienced what is perceived by one neighbor as a installation of an Airbnb. One house, 2 houses away from me, right on Camden Road and Coconino. The people who own the property on 6181 Camden Road, which is the residence of what I understand is a perceived Airbnb, basically decided that they were going to reroute the easement to my property cross Forest Service property, which is federal, move the mailboxes onto another owner's property, which is federal. When I contacted the Forest Service, they said they were not aware of this. When I contacted the post office, they said they were not aware of this. But when the construction workers blocked my access out of my property by standing in the road, blocking my access to ingress and egress into my property, they said they were planning on moving the road on Monday. This was on Thursday. Well, on Monday, they moved the road. They, I believe, removed 12 trees off of Forest Service property, which is probably highly illegal. My discussions with the Forest Service is indicating that they are bringing in the law enforcement agency. The new road has been flagged by the Public Works and Community Development as an illegal road. My concern is if we're bringing in Airbnbs and they think that they can just violate the property rights of all owners without consulting them, doing anything about this is impractical and not possible.
You're gonna need to wrap it up, please. It's 3 minutes.
Okay. The change of easement affects my property rights, and they're putting a cloud on my title.
And Robert, again, this is another matter that we really need to turn over to our, and I'm not sure if it's Public Works. Certainly Andy, our Deputy County Manager, can look into this. And I don't know if you have filed anything or provided any written comments or letters to the county.
I have. Specifically, they were actively out surveying today.
And who did you talk with here at the county?
It was the enforcement area officer for the planning and zoning.
Okay, well, I'm going to turn this over to Andy and have them take a look at this. And if you can contact the county and please provide your contact information. This is really something our staff needs to look into and work with you on. So,
Okay.
Andy, I'm going to ask that you talk with Robert and take a look at what's going on and see what we can do.
Thank you, Chair
I
Horstman.
provided my contact information and I've heard radio silence.
Thank you, Chair Horstman. I just followed up a bit, and Robert, it sounds like there is an active case with the Forest Service on this. If I have it right, the Camden issue.
Yes.
We have.
There needs
issues
to be an
those-
active case with the county
Okay,
because my easement is at risk. And
okay,
the cloud on my title to my property is at risk.
okay.
And we want to take a look at it and try to address this issue with you. So really, we can't do it here during the middle of a public meeting, but we will definitely take a look at it. We appreciate you bringing this to our attention.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate your time.
You have a
Thanks,
great
Robert.
evening. Thank you. All right, members of the public. It's an active board meeting tonight. That's good. We want to hear from you.
Again, you can hit the raise hand icon that looks like a hand if you'd like to provide a comment, or if you've joined by telephone, you can hit *9 on your phone, and that will raise your hand and notify us that you would like to speak. At this time, Chair Horstman, there are no hands raised.
Thank you. All right, this is last call, members of the board, or I'm sorry, members of the public for public comment. If you have any comments, now is your time.
And there are no hands raised.
All right, thank you. At this time, we're going to close public comment, and we want to thank those that did join us this evening. We like to hear from you, and we're going to take a look at this and we will get back to you. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. Members of the board, we're moving along. Our next item of business is our consent agenda. We have a number of items on our consent agenda, 1 through 6. And as you know, members of the board and members of the public, consent agenda items can be handled through one motion in one vote. These are not items that are open for discussion. These are usually administrative or ministerial in nature. and therefore can be handled through one motion and one vote. Members of the board, are there any item you would like to remove from the consent agenda for individual discussion and vote? Or I would entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Madam Chair, I'm not hearing anybody. I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve the consent agenda, items 1 through 6, that we have.
Second the motion.
We have a motion and I believe a second from Vice Chair Vasquez. All those in favor of accepting the consent agenda and approving the consent agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
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 Very good. It is unanimous. Members of the board, we are moving on. We have another consent agenda, but this is as the Flood Control District Board of Directors. So I'm going to ask for a motion for us to resolve as the Flood Control District Board of Directors. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a
Second.
motion. I have a motion by Supervisor Vasquez, second by Supervisor Begay. All those in favor of resolving as Flood Control District Board of Directors signify by saying aye.
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 It is unanimous. We are now the Flood Control District Board of Directors. Members of the board, we have a number of consent agenda items here too, 7 through 15. Once again, these are more administrative or ministerial in nature. They can be handled through one motion and one vote unless we, the board, remove them for individual discussion and motion. Members of the board, I would take I would like to hear from you on whether you want to remove an item, or I would entertain a motion to accept the flood control district consent agenda.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda, which are items 7 through 15.
Thank you very
Second.
much. We have a
Second.
motion and a second by Supervisor Begay to accept the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Very good. It is unanimous. And now, members of the board, we must resolve back as the Board of Supervisors. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Supervisor Begay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Vice Chair. All those in favor of resolving as the Board of Supervisors signify by saying aye.
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 It is unanimous. But now we must resolve as the Jail District Board. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Vice Chair and a second by Supervisor Begay. All those in favor of resolving as the Jail District Board of Directors signify by saying aye.
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 It is unanimous. Members of the board, we have one item as a Jail District consent agenda item to approve agreement with Codex Corporation and associated budget adjustment. All is more fully set forth on our agenda. We can remove this for discussion, or I would accept a motion to accept the Jail District consent agenda item. Do I have comments from the board or a motion?
Move to approve, Madam Chair.
I have a motion by Supervisor Ryan. Do I have a second?
So moved.
Second.
I have a second by Vice Chair. All those in favor of accepting the Jail District consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It is again unanimous. Members of the board, we must now resolve back as the Board of Supervisors. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Supervisor Begay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Vice Chair Vasquez. All those in favor of resolving back as the Board of Supervisors signify by saying aye.
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 It is again unanimous. So thank you. We're the Board of Supervisors and members of the public and members of the board. We are here today as a public hearing, consideration and possible action to adopt ordinance 2023-04, which is a short-term rental ordinance for the unincorporated parts of Coconino County. And what we're going to do for this public hearing is we will first hear from Community Development Director Jay Krisselman, who will give us and make a presentation and give us an overview of the proposed and modified short-term rental ordinance that we're here to discuss. At which point we will ask members of the board if you have any questions of Jay. And then if not, we're going to open this up for public hearing. We have really been looking forward to this day and looking forward from this public hearing and to hear from members of our public. So with that, Jay, unless Andy, you've got anything else you'd like to add, otherwise, Jay, I'm going to turn this over to you, please, for the presentation on the short-term rental ordinance for Coconino County.
Madam Chair and Supervisors, good evening. Jay Kristelman, Community Development. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Mark Stento is also with us, our Compliance Manager. If we could elevate him to panelist, he's got a couple of slides to go over as well. And I thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you, Mark. If you can accept the promotion.
Okay. As Madam Chair mentioned, here we are for our second public hearing for our proposed short-term rental ordinance. I've got a slide here that sort of summarizes how we got here this evening. So back in July of 2022, which was 13 months ago now, the state Senate passed Senate Bill 1168, which gave local jurisdictions, cities and towns, counties included, limited ability to regulate short-term rentals, but it was a tool that we were able to use. So the Board of Supervisors directed county staff, including the attorney's office, and I see Bill's with us this evening, and Heather, I thank you both very much for being here. So we started really working closely with our attorneys and also our fellow jurisdiction, particularly with the city of Flagstaff and 2 additional counties that had interest in adopting some level of short-term rental regulations. So since then, we got to work. County staff has hosted multiple work sessions with the Board of Supervisors, that's the attorney's office, as well as community development. And what came out of those work sessions was our first public hearing, which was hosted in February of this past year, to obtain and assess as much public input as we could. That led us to very much I want to say final draft this evening, but I'm not sure if that's the case. But that's how we got to where we are today. Staff has received over 40 comments. Some of those were duplicates. We received comments from the same people a handful of times since the first public hearing in February, and as a result of the posting of the public hearing here this evening. All but 4 of those comments were in support of creating short-term rental legislation. There were 4 folks that did not want to see additional government involvement in the creation of the ordinance. Now, as I proceed, you'll notice that some of these provisions in the slides, they're largely what you've seen a couple of times already. I wanted to make sure that for transparency, the board and the public both know what stayed in our ordinance versus from the first public hearing. So with that, of course, we are able to require a permit. Local jurisdictions are able to require a permit. For Coconino County, it is in the unincorporated provisions of the county. So that's not the city of Flagstaff. That's not the city of Williams. It's not Page. It's not Sedona. It's the unincorporated locations within the county. And it does allow for us to collect up to $250 for that permit annually. There's an annual review and renewal that goes with that. The STR operator is required to maintain a minimum of $500,000 of liability insurance. Our research has shown that all of the reputable sites are between 1 and 2 million. So that's well below that. It does require a short-term rental operator to notify neighbors, and state statute tells us that the neighbors can be notified directly adjacent to the STR operator, across the street and across the street diagonally. And it is required in that notification that an emergency point of contact be listed to respond to complaints and or emergencies. Now, there was some discussion that took place earlier today. Our former version of the ordinance had responding within a reasonable time frame. I think there was desire to make that more finite. So we are proposing that the operator or the emergency point of contact must respond within 72 hours. And our thought there was that that would span a 3-day weekend in case somebody's on vacation, for example. The operator is required to have and maintain a transaction privilege tax license number. That is for the benefit of the assessor's office and the overall county. There is an allowance for an increasing style of financial penalties for verified violations. There's 2 types of verified violations. We'll get to that in a moment. That's actually one of the more profound changes in the ordinance, which the last 2 slides highlight the differences in our current draft that we're discussing this evening. STRs will be prevented from being used as venues for special events. That's one of the most common things that we see in violations of current short-term rental establishments, is then being used for weddings most frequently, with way more people than should be at that location. It is going to require the STR operator to maintain reasonable access for first responders. That's particular during well, it's all the time, but it's most impactful during the winter parking ordinance. That's when we see our most challenges. It thoroughly outlines the enforcement and citation process. That's another area that was a bit more of a profound change that we're thankful for. And there is an allowance through an established county hearing officer to either suspend or revoke a permit for violating these verified violations that I'm going to get into here in just a second. Or assess fines. Now, the verified violations that are specific to revocation or suspension are 4-fold. So if a felony offense is committed at or in the vicinity of an STR, serious physical injury or wrongful death occurs as a result of an STR from intentional reckless conduct of the STR owner or owner's designee. And please keep in mind that these 4 items are straight out of state statute. An owner or designee of an STR knowingly or intentionally houses a registered sex offender, offenses relating to an adult-oriented business, or using the STR venue as a sober living home. And finally, the verified violation that was added is an owner or designee knowingly or intentionally allowing the use of an STR for a special event identified as an event that would otherwise require a special event permit. Before I turn the enforcement process over to our compliance manager, is there any questions of me?
Members of the board, any questions? I know this is something we have gone over as a board for some time. But you know what, I'm gonna, and I know I was going to save this till the end, but any comments to date right now with where we are from Bill Ring or Heather Mosier? From our county attorney and deputy county attorney, who have been very, very instrumental in working very closely with the board on this. So any comments at this point, either Bill or Heather?
Madam Chair, this is Bill Ring.
Yes, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you very much, by the way, to Mr. Crystalman's Department of Community Development. They've been conscientious about the drafting of this ordinance, even though it's taken a period of time. We've taken that time to educate ourselves on the statute in great detail and trying to conform this proposed ordinance before you tonight to really address what perhaps is the overarching policy concern we heard expressed by the Board of Supervisors. And you can clarify my comment, Madam Chair, if you choose to. But the issue here really is the land use of structures such as single-family homes, where we all have an expectation of how a single-family home can and should operate. And if an Airbnb or a VRBO or a short-term rental is functioning within our expectation as neighbors and community members of how a single-family residence should perform, then this ordinance is designed to really focus upon registration. We want those users of residential property for short-term rental to register their units so we know where they're located. And that really aids not only Mr. Crystalman's Department of Community Development in further managing the ordinance, but it also aids us in terms of sheriff's office response, public safety response, from fire and other types of emergency responders who understand, the intensity of the use inside a neighborhood and what to expect when they arrive. The second part of the ordinance, however, is to have a unit of enforcement for those individuals who would violate the terms and conditions of the ordinance. And so in the ordinance, you see sections devoted to citation and enforcement. And so, Madam Chair, we're quite pleased to support the Department of Community Development, Jay Christelman, his enforcement officers. Andy Bertelson has worked with us extensively to have success in the preparation and drafting of this ordinance. So I'll stop there, Madam Chair, wait for either comments from the Board of Supervisors or any questions that you may find you'd wish to direct to me or to Heather Mosier.
Thank you, County Attorney, and again, thank you and Heather for your involvement in this and really working with us to, as you say, really try to encompass and incorporate the real spirit of the concerns that we have heard addressed from our residents here. And I'm going to hold off for my comments until the public hearing, but any other questions, members of the board, that you may have, and thank you for that clear and concise overview, County Attorney. Any other comments, questions, members of the board, or we'll ask Jay to continue. All right, seeing none, Jay, please continue.
Madam Chair, thank you. Thank you, Kenny, Attorney Ring. Mark is going to take it over from here. So Mark, just let me know when you want me to advance the slide. There's just these three.
Okay, thanks, Jay. Good evening, Madam Chair, Supervisors. I'm Mark, of course, with Community Development's Code Enforcement Department. So once a short-term rental permit has been lawfully issued, revocation or suspension of that permit is going to proceed through our existing citation and hearing process, and that the offending property will be issued a notice to appear, and the county will seek adjudication in favor of revocation, presenting one of those, again, verified violations that Jay mentioned earlier, to attempt to, again, revoke that property's short-term rental permit. We aim to support our efforts by increasing our staffing by a dedicated code enforcement officer who will pursue specifically short-term rental related issues, and will also be at least somewhat responsible for the permitting process as well, to lend it to a degree of oversight. Jay, why don't you go ahead and move forward? Thank you.
We did have our full-time admin code enforcement specialist that started yesterday. So we're making progress in the recruitment world. Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
No, quite all right. That is, we are very relieved to have that additional administrative support, and that will play a role in pursuing enforcement pursuant to this ordinance as well. So a substantive change with this iteration of the ordinance, citations can be, as Jay noted earlier, direct filed outside of our existing citation and hearing process, which is again a more expeditious avenue to compliance in the case of certain types of violations, including registration violations. We anticipate we will be able to issue citations more readily, to summarize, in certain situations, again with registration violations, and we will not have to schedule a hearing date, bring the violator to the hearing, and go through the rigmarole that constitutes our typical process. Thank you, Jay.
I do have, can I ask something real quick? Sorry, Jay. Mark, can you go into a little bit more detail on that, on the citation? Because I think this is important for the public to understand.
Certainly. So when we look at some of our violations, we can, and I'm going to switch to that section real quick in the ordinance. So on the finding of, for example, a registration violation, we can fine up to $500 for the first violation, up to $1,000 for the second violation, $3,500 for the third violation. And then once we've reached 3 verified violations, we can potentially look at holding a hearing and considering revocation of that short-term rental permit application. So this version of the ordinance that we're looking at today is going on to define some of those registration violations or other verified violations by the big 4 that Jay mentioned, to include a violation of the duty to properly register, violation of the duty to annually renew, to provide proper notice to adjacent properties. Note that it is to provide notice, not to receive approval by adjacent properties. A violation of the duty to provide notice to the director, his or her designee of transfer of a vacation rental. Violation of duty to provide proof of compliance with ARS 425005. Violation related to not displaying a vacation or short-term rental permit along with the advertisement for the venue. And it's worth noting that in this iteration, we can also rely on prima facie evidence, which is defined, I should say, in this iteration, to pursue enforcement related to that verified violation. And an example of that, again, pursuant to the definition here, is simply an advertisement of that short-term rental online.
Mhm.
Does that answer your question, Madam
Yeah,
Chair?
it does. I just want to, underscore the importance for any ordinance that it is enforced timely in an expedited manner, which is exactly what this proposed ordinance does provide. And that's why I wanted you to go through that, Mark. So thank you so much. Appreciate
Yes,
it.
ma'am, I understand. And
Supervisor Ryan.
I'll wait for Mark's comment, but yes, I'd like to thank you, Madam Chair. I think Mark was just following up on that.
just anecdotally, if the ordinance is adopted, we will be issuing citations, that's for sure. And I think we were still on 10. I think we kind of hit on most of those items there in the expanded definitions. Jay, do you have anything to add?
No, Madam Chair. Thanks, Mark. That was helpful. So we do have 30 days, which is written into the ordinance, to get somebody who is out of compliance with a verified violation as it pertains to a registration violation. And as County Attorney Ring had said, our goal here is to get them into compliance with the registration, or we're calling it a permit. It's actually a very simple process that we've created. It's simple through state statute. Our online permitting software, if you've never used it before, it's a little quirky. That's how all software is. But once you get used to it, it's a very simple permit to obtain. We'll verify the items that we need to, and you're a lawful operator. So, yeah.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Supervisor Ryan.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going to go. I was going to ask Mark, but Jake captured it. And a point to make that we have here. We have many people that are functioning in an appropriate manner out there. And so the intent is not that we're in an enforcement mode, that we're going to be watching over you and looking for citations. If you're functioning well, registration is important. But we also need the tool to be able to work with those that are not responsible owners. And so a point is that there's a chance for people to register. There is a educational component that goes along with this as well. Is that correct, Jay?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Ryan, that's absolutely correct. And that actually is a good segue into the kind of our final slide, unless there's more comment before I recommend a 120-day grace period to obtain the permits. One is to hire our code enforcement officer. We do have some applicants. Mark is vetting them now. The city actually is also proposing the same thing. As you know, they just recently adopted their ordinance, and our ordinance would go into effect November 14th, if passed, and a 120-day grace period was established, which puts it just 1 week behind when the cities goes into effect. But of course, we are here to take public hearings, so I don't want to get too far ahead of myself.
All right, thank you, and thanks for that. And I think what we want to note, members of the board, is the staff requests a 120-day grace period to obtain the permit due to the staff abilities to generate public awareness. This would be somewhat of a change from our draft that we've been looking at. And so that's just something to kind of highlight, members of the board, as we discuss this moving forward. And I think also, is there anything else in terms of timelines you were looking at, Jay, for a definition of reasonable time?
Madam Chair, thank you for that. What I proposed in the slide up here, let me go back up to it. I realized I never went into slideshow mode. I've been in presentation mode this whole time.
And I apologize, I didn't even notice.
So it was currently written with the operators required to respond to a complaint. Emergencies we're not worried about, because if it's a true emergency, I think emergency services is going to get there much quicker than what we would consider a reasonable time, or even 72 hours. But for the broad nature of complaints, we had suggested 72-hour time frame, which would allow the spanning of a 3-day weekend in case staff or others were on vacation.
So really, these are two things that we, the board, have not looked at as part of our draft. I know we've discussed this. So let's make sure, members of the board, that we go back there for our discussion, probably after our public hearing, unless there are comments the board members want to make now.
And Madam Chair, there was one other date that comes to mind since you brought it up. I thank you for that. The department would be required to issue or deny the short-term rental permit within 7 days. That was another part of the reason that staff's recommending a 120-day grace period. Just in the event that we received, 1,000 applications in the next 2 or 3 weeks, the ability to issue or denial of those in 7 days could be problematic.
Very good. All right. Thank you. Any other comments, questions of the board? Any comments from either our county attorney, Bill Ring, or Heather Mosier, our deputy county attorney, on this?
Madam Chair, we'll stand by for questions at the end of the public hearing.
Thank you. Really appreciate that, and appreciate you being with us tonight. So, all right. I am seeing no further comments from the board or staff at this point. And Jay and Mark, as always, we so appreciate all of your hard work on this and your overview on our new proposed ordinance. And so with that, I am going to go ahead and open this to the public hearing. I'm going to turn this over also to our clerk to explain about that public hearing and how it's going to be handled. And I also want to note that we did receive today a number of written comments that have been made online to the county's website. And I want to make sure that and let the public know those will be included as part of our public record on this, and will be included as written comments for the public hearing. And so with that, Lindsay, I'm going to turn this over to you, and I'm going to ask Jay for you to get this off your PowerPoint off the screen. All right, now we're back. So, and Lindsay, would you please explain to the public how they can join us for our short-term rental ordinance for the public hearing portion of our hearing, or of our meeting?
Thank you, Chair Horstman. At this time, if anyone would like to make a comment during this public hearing, you can hit the raise hand icon that will appear at the bottom of your screen. If you hover towards the bottom of your screen, it looks like a hand. If you click on that, that will raise your hand and notify us that you would like to speak. If you've joined the meeting by telephone, you can hit *9 on your telephone, and that will raise your hand and notify us that you would like to speak.
All right, members of the public, we do want to hear from you. We have been encouraging you to contact us on this. This is an important step for our community, and we look forward to hearing from you.
And Chair Horseman, I do have somebody here with their hand up that has raised the hand that's on the telephone. So I'm going to go ahead and allow this person on the phone to speak. If you could please state your name and address for the record. We will start the timer for 3 minutes after you provide that. And once I allow you to speak, if you can hit *6, that will unmute you.
All right.
There you go.
Hi. Thank you. My name is Shanna Yazzie. My address is Post Office Box 208, Cameron, Arizona, 86020. I too have a Airbnb on Navajo Nation, and I'm curious if this ordinance within the Coconino County applies to my business as well.
Thank you for bringing that up. And it really is important to talk about where this does apply and where it doesn't apply. And I believe that you heard this is for outside of municipalities. So for Flagstaff, Williams, Sedona, those municipalities do have their own, and we have worked with them. Now, since you are on the Navajo Nation, and I'm going to turn this over to our county attorney, who will give you the legal analysis on whether this applies or not. So, Bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Ms. Yazzie, as a matter of general law, the county lacks jurisdiction to enforce civil code, such as a short-term rental ordinance on the Navajo Nation. The nation can elect its own laws and govern itself in those affairs. The only caveat I would offer is we do have areas of County Island inside the Navajo Nation, including areas of Tuba City, where we do have a jurisdictional boundary. And the only question you would have to ask yourself is whether you are in a county island inside the reservation, or whether you are, wholly within the Navajo Nation. If you are wholly within the Navajo Nation, we lack jurisdiction to enforce our civil codes in that part of Indian country.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Thanks, Jana. Thanks for joining us tonight. So members of the public, we look forward to hearing from you.
Okay, and Chair Horseman, I do have Vince Keenan with a hand up. I'm going to go ahead and allow to speak. Vince, if you could please unmute, state your name and address for the record, and I will start the clock for 3 minutes once you state that.
Okay, my name is Vince Keenan. I live at 8875 North Snowball Ranch Road, I guess out in Fort Valley area. One of the things I noticed, you do address the definition of a single family, which is great, but we have many houses on our block, 3 of them now. They cram 3 bunk beds in a single bedroom. They take a 4-bedroom house, it sleeps 16, 18, 20, large groups, 5, 7 cars, ATVs. How do we enforce this as a resident? Are we supposed to take pictures, bring it to the county? I mean, obviously I can't go over and invade their privacy and say, hey, how are you related? This is a major issue with short-term rentals. And I'm just curious how this is going to get addressed, considering I'm sure the sheriff doesn't want to get called out for these kinds of things. This is not for them to do. So I'll just stop there and, see how you respond or how that is supposed to work. I'm just a little confused here. The other stuff I get on enforcement, very straightforward.
Thank you, Vince. And that's a very good question. And I'm going to turn this over to both Jay and also to Mark, who are overseeing this and our enforcement, to give you an idea. And I think that is a great example. And Jay and Mark, if you could kind of walk Vince and everybody else that may be on tonight on how that would be handled. You have a situation where you have a short-term rental across from you. It looks like it appears to be filled to the brim, say. And how would a member of the community file a complaint, and what do they need to do And what information should they provide? Should they be taking pictures? So Jay and Mark.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Mr. Keenan, thank you for bringing that up. It is something that Mark and I have talked about at length, the enforceability of that provision. It would largely be anecdotal to begin with. We would have to try to establish the fact that it's obvious that they're not related. That would be obviously without knocking on doors and asking for driver's licenses and things like that. That could be viewed as fairly intrusive. Mark, do you have any additional after the fact? So we have talked about contacting Airbnb, VRBO, whatever the venue might be, but for them to be able to turn that information over to us is a wild card, to say the least. So anecdotal evidence would be where we would start. Mark, I'll let you take it from there.
And I think the language we discussed was a preponderance of the evidence. So there would be a, certainly if a reporting party can take photos and show us some idea of the activity that's going on there, that's going to be helpful. It's probably not going to make our case. On some circumstances, something like knocking on a door a couple of times over a period of days and seeing who you get and asking questions can get you pretty far in a non-invasive manner. Now, that's not something we necessarily have the time or resources to do in every single situation, but kind of bringing it back into what the reporting party can do. So that documentation is helpful. We have a case request system where we can take case requests through our web portal. We can't attach files, but reporting parties can give me an email address as part of that. We can reach out, connect, and then get that information, however it can be sent, again, preferably through email, and add the reporting party's documentation to our own or any that we may gather, and try and put a case together the old-fashioned way, is what it comes down to in those situations. But certainly that particular situation may, under some circumstances, pose some difficulties, but we will try with the resources we have at our disposal.
And if I may just add to it a little bit, Vince, obviously how they advertise their short-term rental is going to be looked at and will be reviewed. I think also the more information that you might be able to provide without, of course, trespassing on the property would probably be good. For example, photos, etc. There is going to be, as part of the ordinance, a contact person. Probably the first thing that would be done is you could contact yourself, or you could turn that over to the county for us to contact and indicate that there is a large number of cars, there's a large number of people, etc. And we could take a look at that. Also in here, and I think this is really, really important, and I really thank the county attorney and deputy county attorney for this, that in the registration process, there is going to be a attestation of the owners of this short-term rental that it does in fact meet and comply with our short-term rental ordinance and requirements. And that would be that it meets the requirements of being a single family residence. And anything else you want to add on that, county attorney?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm glad that you brought out those last 2 points. And I do want to thank Mr. Keenan for having thoroughly read through the ordinance to make himself aware of the enforceability and the issues. I would just point out, as you did, Madam Chair, that Section 1.1D, site management requirements, includes subsection 3, which says site response requirement. So in the event that community development receives a complaint of any kind in nature, it could be Mr. Keenan or someone else in the county who would call and say, I observed an intensity of use at this property that does not describe single family. And what the owner, by operation of this ordinance, has is, as you will discuss as a board, a reasonable amount of time, or 72 hours, with which they shall respond to the complaint that we receive from citizens who are attempting enforcement. So the site management requirements require the owner to respond. And a non-response then triggers the cascade of enforcement. The other thing that the ordinance achieves is the mere registration. So when an incident does occur, when a complaint is made, we actually have a respondent that we're going to contact to derive an explanation for what occurred at the property that generated the complaint. So that's why, as a board, you've emphasized the registration of all properties that are operating as Airbnb, because when we know who the operators are and where they are, we have a mechanism in place to respond to complaints and then escalate the enforcement. I appreciate Mr. Keenan's thorough reading of the ordinance, and he does raise, the elementary question. The thing if you don't mind, Madam Chair, that I would add is when you take a look at the definitions, the definitional section that we worked on, quite frankly, Madam Chair, at your insistence, and we're glad that happened. we utilize the definitions in our zoning code to emphasize what a dwelling unit is and what a family is and what a single family dwelling unit does. It's all there for the purpose of not only education, but for enforcement. So, I'll stop there, and I thank Mr. Keenan for his participation.
Thank you. Vince, I hope we've helped you a little bit on this.
Yes.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us tonight.
And next up, we have Aaron. Aaron, I'm going to go ahead and, there you go. Aaron, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak. If you can just unmute and state your name and address, and then I will start the clock for 3 minutes.
Yes, my name is Aaron Tennell. I live at 6171 East Camden Road. I am appreciative of this ordinance. We have a large vacation rental. There's approximately 3 or 4 lots away from ours. And it has dozens of people there on most weekends doing large special events that often go well into the night with a PA system and very loud music that is absolutely a disturbance to the tone of our community. And I'm curious, I appreciate that the language is around, the standard operation of a single family dwelling. Assuming that such a property did find a way to reduce the number of people staying there to conform to this ordinance, is there any provision or how do noise violations interact with this potential ordinance that you're putting through? And I'll go ahead and go offline and allow you guys to address that. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron, and great question. And again, I'm going to turn this over to community development, to both Jay and Mark, because you're going to be overseeing this. So please let us know, help Aaron with his concerns and question.
Madam Chair, thank you. Mr. Tunnell, thank you for the comments. Noise complaints generally are handled by the sheriff's office through a nuisance, and that mainly is because they happen after hours when oftentimes community development staff is not working. So you can always have that avenue, regardless if this ordinance was in place or not. That's typically how noise or disturbing of the peace, particularly after hours issues, are addressed. I hope that helps to answer your question.
So in other words, your noise ordinance complaint would still be made to the county sheriff. Is that right, Jay?
Madam Chair, that's correct. That's how it currently operates, and we don't see that changing.
The sheriff's office to take care of this stuff. So.
Any questions, Aaron? I'm sorry. All right. Thank you. So let's move on. Any other, Lindsay, you're on mute.
Sorry, Chair.
You're doing what that might be the first time you've done that, and I have to tell you, you're awfully good.
Thank you. I do have a bye. I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak. If you can unmute, state your name and address for the record, and then we will start the clock for 3 minutes after you state that.
Thank you very much. My name is Abhi Subaratanam. My address is 1846 Innovation Park Drive, Oro Valley. I have a property in Valley, and I'm curious to know, does the ordinance only apply to single family rental units, or you also have provisions to cover alternative structures that can go through this process?
So they do apply for rentals, and any short-term rental, which is defined by the ordinance as anything under 30 days. And I apologize, I'm not sure.
Sure. So yeah, my question, I heard a lot about single family homes. So I was curious to know if your ordinance would describe in detail what structures would be permitted as a short-term rental unit. For example, would an A-frame or another type of dwelling unit qualify?
And I'm going to turn this over to the county attorney who's got his hand up on this. So thank you for your question.
Yeah, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Mr. Abhi, this ordinance applies throughout the jurisdiction of Coconino County, and it applies to all structures that are habitated. If they're offered for short-term rental, that is rental less than 30 days, then this ordinance applies to that land use. All right. And so it could be single family, multifamily. It doesn't apply to hotel motel because they're regulated as a commercial property through either permitted or conditional uses that are obtained at the time that the unit is put to use. So this ordinance applies throughout the county. And Jay, I would just turn to Jay Christelman in the department to perhaps address the question of what is a habitable structure. But any structure, whether in any condition that is offered for short-term rental, is subject to this ordinance. Besides commercial properties such as hotel, motel.
Madam Chair, County Attorney, thank you for that. The way that we would define it is if it's a structure built to the International Residential Code, it is a habitable structure, permitted, of course, has to be lawfully permitted. So it would not apply to an RV, for example. It would not apply to a tent or a yurt, unless, of course, that tent or yurt met the provisions of the International Residential Code. So I hope that helps to clarify it.
Abhi, does it make it a little easier? You have any other questions?
It does. Yeah, thank you for the clarification. Look forward to reading through any documentation that you might publish, and I'll circle back if I have more questions. Thank you.
Very good. And by the way, we have published our proposed ordinance on the county website. So we would definitely refer you to that, and hope you can take a look at that. And thank you for your comments this evening.
And next we do have someone on the telephone. I'm going to go ahead. It's a 480 number, and I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak. And if you hit *6, that will unmute yourself. If you can please state your name and address for the record, and then I will start the clock for 3 minutes.
I think that would be me. I'm Jack Corson, 1395 East Big Bear Trail down in Munns Park. I'm hearing a lot of great
name
stuff.
again. I apologize. Would you mind saying your name again? I didn't get it.
Sure. Jack Corson down in Munns Park.
Thank you.
I first want to commend everybody for this opportunity. Hearing everything I'd like to hear, very hopeful. Real simple question, folks. Next steps. And is there a concerted effort from lobbyists to oppose this ordinance? What can we expect, and what's the timing, please? Thank you.
Very good. Well, we're considering it tonight. It is set for discussion and possible action. So assuming that after our public hearing and after discussion with the board could certainly elect to go forward. And if the board goes forward with it, we would pass it tonight. The recommendation is to wait 120 days before the commencement of enforcement. And we would have to, and we would want to, and we would intend to do a public outreach. So we would contact members of the public to notify them of the new ordinance, let them know what their responsibilities are. I know community development had a wonderful trifold, and I know that will be updated with the new ordinance information so we can get the information out. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, for the record, on behalf of all my neighbors, you would be our new best friend. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And thanks for joining us tonight.
Yes.
Okay, again, if there is anyone that would like to speak during this public hearing, you can hit the raise hand icon that looks like a hand if you hover towards the bottom of your screen. If you click on that, that will raise your hand and notify us that you would like to speak. If you've joined us by telephone tonight, you can hit *9 and that will raise your hand and notify us that you would like to speak.
Members of the public, we really look forward to hearing from you.
And at this time, Chair Horseman, there are no hands. Oh, there's one. Okay, a couple more. I've got Bernice. Bernice, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak. If you can just unmute yourself, state your name and address for the record, and then I will start the clock for 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Bernice Carver. My address is 7550 Derryberry Drive, Flagstaff. I'm out in Donny Park. We do have a rental that's about a block and a half from our house, and there's times when their DJs play the music so loud that it rattles the windows in our house. And I'm concerned about the number of people, again, the noises. Some people are afraid to make a complaint because they're afraid of repercussions. A lot of us have animals out here, and we're really concerned about our own safety as well as that of our animals that we have out here. I would request that that you not allow short-term rentals on private roads that are unmaintained, that have easements. We have had as many as 50 cars at these short-term rentals. And, because we have large acreages out here, some are 2.5, some are 5, some are only 1. But we've had things over at that short-term rental that there've been at least 50 cars. That's really, really hard on our roads out here. There's a lot of dust. It's a health issue. We've got a lot of older retired people out here with COPD and they're older people and they can't be breathing all this dust. And to just have the adjacent houses notified when you're allowing the short-term rental occupants to be driving across our easements in front of our houses, and we don't get notified if they're not right adjacent. So I would like to expand that notification. I would also like to limit the number of occupants that are in the houses themselves or on the property themselves to help minimize the road repair issues. We're having a really hard time getting our roads repaired out here. Not all the people want to contribute, and I can see that really increasing with more short-term rentals. We do have the same short-term rental that I was talking about. I've seen RVs over there too, where they'll rent it out to people, and then other people will bring their RVs onto the property, and so that would be something to be addressed. Thank you for mentioning about the sheriff's department. If we feel threatened or it would be nice to have an anonymous system of complaints. I've been trying to get the county to do this since all 14 other counties allow anonymous complaints. We don't have to be anonymous to the sheriff's department, but we could be anonymous to the owners of the VRBOs. And
Bernice, if you could please wrap up, that's 3 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm concerned about RVs coming out. We have had a lot of RVs coming out in the forest around here that have been dumping their sewage. So I'm concerned about the sewage, issues of allowing RVs on these properties too. And I appreciate you having this public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernice, and thank you for your comments. And just a couple of things that I'd like to make, and other folks from the board may also may want to chime in as well, or also from our county attorney. But first of all, this does not apply to RVs. It applies for short-term rentals of structures. So if somebody is out there dispersed camping or illegally dispersed camping on or near your property, that is really something you're going to need to take up with the sheriff, and that is not part of our ordinance that we're talking about tonight. And the second thing is, and I know that my board members also share this with me, and that is that we are limited on what we can and cannot do or regulate on the short-term rental ordinance because of state law. And we have just gotten a small window on being able to regulate our short-term rental ordinances. We would agree with you that these are local issues and should be handled best by local government. But that is not what the law right now allows us to do. So what we have been doing as a board, and with the help of our county attorney and county attorney's office, are doing what we can consistent with the statute on being able to monitor, regulate, oversee, and enforce the ordinance that we're proposing tonight. So it's not going to be an end-all be-all. There will continue to be violations. We are limited in what we can enforce, but we're going to try to do our best. And by the way, we also acknowledge, as I think some of my colleagues have already stated, not everybody's a bad actor. And most of our short-term rentals are not bad actors. We are hopeful that this ordinance is going to promote voluntary compliance and promote, a much better good neighbor attitude for our neighborhoods. But we know that there will probably continue to be violations. To the extent we can, we are going to try to regulate as our proposed ordinance does, and enforce this ordinance. So thank you for your comments. Any other comments board members would like to make, or there's anything I missed, County Attorney?
Madam Chair, I think you did an excellent summary of the limitations. Our limitations were defined for us in Senate Bill 1168. But you've taken the opportunity as a board to address as much as you can with the entitlement that the legislature gave you, which was a small entitlement. But for members of the public, it's fair to acknowledge that there are private causes of action that can be utilized by property owners. For instance, if an easement is being overburdened by a particular use, you can explore the possibilities of legal action that are taken privately, not publicly by Coconino County, but privately between property owners. So you're not without remedies. The only thing is that we're limited by the short-term rental legislation and our ordinance. We're limited in the remedies that we can achieve ourselves. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Otherwise, we'll continue to open up to members of the public.
Chair Horseman, I do have a few more hands.
Let's go forward.
Paula, I see your hand raised. I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak. If you can please unmute, and then, looks like Paula disappeared here. So Little Lot Farm, I've allowed you to speak. If you can please state your name and address for the record, and then I will start the clock for 3 minutes.
Yes, my name is Christina Rainsford. I reside at 1425 West Cochran Avenue. And first of all, I would like to thank Chairwoman Horseman for your last comment where you said that the majority of short-term rental owners in Coconino County are not bad apples. My husband and I would definitely belong in that group. We have neighbors who have even said that they appreciate living near one of the best Airbnbs in town, that they have never had any problems. The Airbnb that we are owners of automatically fall within the parameters of what is written in that ordinance. We do not see, it will be a seamless permit process for us and very easy. The only thing I would like to encourage is, I know that this process is going to cost the county money. My perception, though, is that the supervisors chose to put this permit in place at the maximum allowable cost according to the law, instead of starting it at a lower permit fee and then seeing where it fits, what the revenues are. If the revenues have supplied efficiently, provided efficiently for what the expenses are going to be with this program. And then, if necessary, in year 2, raise the cost of the permit instead of going to the maximum allowable by law. So that would be my encouragement as you vote on it tonight, that you would consider lowering that permit fee, because we do provide something valuable to this county in having short-term rentals. The county does benefit already by the taxes that we do pay for every stay, the taxes that our guests pay per every stay, and then just all the undefinable benefits that the county does receive by the visitors that do come to Coconino County. And I appreciate you allowing me to say my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us. And thank you for bringing that perspective. I think that's important. And by the way, short-term rentals offer a wonderful opportunity for our tourism and recreational outreach here in Coconino County. So we know that, we acknowledge that, we gain a benefit, and you provide a benefit for many people who come here to Coconino County and take part in all the Coconino County has to offer. So we want to point that out and thank you. Thank you for being a good citizen and good neighbor to your community. And that's really important. And quite frankly, that's all we're trying to do with this ordinance. And so thank you again, and thank you for your comments. And we appreciate your comments about the fee. That is something obviously that we have been looking at, and there is a cost to the enforcement, as you can understand, oversight, administrative, and enforcement costs. And we would like to have that covered. So, but we'll take your comments very seriously and under advisement. So thanks for your input very much. And thanks for joining us tonight. So others.
Next, I have Trish. Trish, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak. If you can unmute and state your name and address for the record, and then I will start your 3 minutes.
Trish Meredith, it's 10335 Roan Road in Coconino. I'm just wondering if there's a provision that's being put in place that I have not heard of that does protect the short-term rental owners from false reporting or from neighbors ganging up. We've had neighbors that have tried to stir others up and scare them with things that aren't true. A lot of what Robert said earlier was like 90% false, probably, but so what do you do when you've got that going on and it's not even accurate?
Well, I'm going to turn this over to both Mark and also to Jay. So what happens if you have false reporting going on, or a neighbor who is harassing a short-term rental owner?
Madam Chair, Supervisors, Mr. Meredith, thank you. So that's part of our investigation. It's usually not difficult for us to tell when a complainant is being truthful or not. Not to say it's not impossible, but that's part of our investigation. Mark, I'll let you finish that statement, but
thank you, Jay. Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. I've investigated a lot of code enforcement requests, and I've certainly run into many situations of false reporting. They're usually identified fairly easy early on. Now, we're not like law enforcement in the sense that there are potential criminal penalties for false reporting. It's up to us, if that is a reoccurring issue, to adjudicate appropriately. But this is not new to the code enforcement world, and we will investigate and then, if necessary, filter complaints accordingly.
Thank you.
Trish, does that answer your questions?
I think so. Thank you.
Thank
Madam-
you. Thank you for joining. I'm so sorry, Matt. Did you have some comments?
Yeah, Madam Chair, it also states in the ordinance itself, because part of the question was protections for short-term owners, that evidence can be provided both sides associated with it. Not only do we have the investigation, but that is in the ordinance as well.
Very good. All right, any other comments? Otherwise, we'll go on to the next community member.
Okay, next I do have somebody on the telephone with a 480 area code. I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak. You'll just want to hit *6 to unmute yourself, and then please state your name and address for the record, and I will then start the 3-minute countdown.
Thank you. It's Jack Corson again over here, 1395 Big Bear in Monks Park. I got to address the elephant in the room. Somebody just said that you guys are severely restricted by state law. And if that isn't the crux of the matter, a certain governor with a certain state law put us all in this terrible position. My question is, how do we address challenging and overturning this state law? What is the process?
Well, that may be on the scope here, but we'll go ahead and try to give you some ideas. And Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Since the state law had been written to create this opportunity, we then saw it transpire into, it started to affect residential zoning. We started to get many complaints. In essence, it was corrupting what we perceived to be residential zoning. And so for several years, we had been working along with League of Cities and Towns, so County Supervisors Association, we're working on legislation, and so was the Arizona Association of Counties. Certainly, we worked through compromises. There were limits, but this is the tool that we have been provided. And now that we have the tool, we have an opportunity to create an ordinance to implement the tool. So that is our protection that we have now. We have worked through the legislative process to get this. If we create a tool that works well, it tends to get quiet. If it's not working well, then we go back and bring this to the attention of our legislators, as well as the public, to our legislators. So that's a very complicated process put into a couple sentences here. Thanks, Madam Chair.
And I want you to know we've tried and we'll continue to try.
Yeah, I appreciate that response, but it doesn't answer the question. You said yourself you are restricted by state law and you're doing everything you can, and I appreciate that. It's not enough because the state law still restricts you.
Yeah.
That's got to be addressed. And I didn't hear an answer to that. And I understand it could be a very complicated process, but what can we, the public, do to promote that change?
Okay. And I'm going to add on to this. This is the state legislature. That means it's our state Senate and it's our state House. And the best you can do is obviously contact your state representatives, both in the House and in the Senate, and let them know how you feel about it. And I want you to know we've done that. We are not happy when the legislature takes away our local control on things that should be local issues. This is one of many, quite frankly. And so we would love to have your voice down there at the state legislature to let them know that these local issues, such as short-term rentals, are best handled locally by those that live here, know the neighborhoods, and know the communities. So, your voice is important. I appreciate you sharing with us tonight, your voice, but get down there and share it with them.
Well,
that's.
anything we, thank you. Anything we can do to join forces. We do have a common interest. I can't imagine how difficult this is made for you guys on your end. So here we are all stuck in the middle, right?
Well, we're going to do the
All
best
right.
we can, and we're going to continue to advocate, and we appreciate your voice on that too.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us tonight. Do we have some more?
Yes, we do. Next, we have Paula. Paula, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak. If you can please state your name and address for the record, and then I will count the clock for 3 minutes. If you just want to unmute, please.
My name is Paula Coolin. I'm at 5915 East Camden Road. You guys were talking about the violations that you know, once they get 3 violations, is there going to be a time frame for those violations? So, you know, if you get 1 violation, you know, this week, and then next month you get another one, yes, that would be number 1 and 2. But if you're, you know, waiting until 2 years later and you get the second violation, is that first violation actually going to still be in effect? My other question is, on the 120 days, will the applicants be able to run their short-term rentals during that 120-day wait period? And I've got one more. Oh, and the, you know, compliance officers, if something happened over the weekend, how would we get a hold of them to be able to have them come out to take a look at that? And I also agree with Bernice that there should be a limit of occupancy, but that you can possibly, you know, do an addendum to it or something if possible.
All right, Paula, those are great questions. I'm going to turn this over to our county attorney for some of this, but I'm going to say this. As we said before, we are limited on what we can regulate, and we cannot regulate the number of people in the short-term rental, with the exception of looking at the underlying zoning ordinance, which defines single-family residence as 5 unrelated folks. So other than that, we cannot regulate any further, even if we'd like to, and I think many of us would like to. So with that, there's some other really good questions about the violations, and is there a time period for those violations? And 120 days, can they continue to operate during that 120-day time period? And what was the other one, Paula? I think I missed one.
Just a moment here. It was time frame for the violations, the 120 days. Oh, how to get a hold of the compliance officers over the weekend. Okay. And also maybe you guys might be able to, down the road, look at doing the permit fee according to the size of the house.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to turn this over to Bill Ring first, and then I'll turn this over on the compliance officers during weekend to our compliance officer, Mark, and also any comments from Jay. So Bill first.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Paula for the many questions. You know, we've taken a team approach to this ordinance, and so Jay and the community development can assist with these answers. But when I look at what is proposed for the board's adoption, there is a section that is 1.1I, subsection 1, and A and B. I'm looking at the ordinance right now. I'm just trying to cite you to the source. But suspension of a vacation or short-term rental permit can occur if there are 3 or more verified violations within a 12-month period. So yes, we are counting. The clock starts with the first violation, and that's as to the verified violations. But if there's enforcement of a more severe violation, and they're outlined in the ordinance, you know, that we are not limited by this ordinance from taking other remedies that the county has through other ordinances, such as the health code, our environmental services codes, our zoning codes, from going directly to court to enjoin some of the worst violators that we could imagine. But, you know, with saying that comment, Madam Chair, you know, I do return to, you know, the comments that were offered, I believe, by Trish, that there are many good actors out there. And the idea is not to crack down on the good actors. The idea is to enforce against the bad actors. And so what we're really seeking is compliance with registration, so that we can understand where these land uses are occurring and who we need to contact in the event of a complaint. But the ordinance, as I said, allows for a route to suspension, and it's described further in the ordinance. Jay, or have you got anything that you would add to that answer?
Madam Chair and County Attorney Ring, so not a whole lot of substantive to what you had said. The 120-day grace period, if the Board of Supervisors chooses to adopt that, we would obviously encourage those out there that are operating short-term rentals to get their permit as soon as possible. We've already created the form. It's an online form. It'll be live. I don't want to say it first thing tomorrow morning, but it might be 9 o'clock tomorrow morning for those to get their permits obtained. As far as contacting code enforcement staff on a weekend, you could certainly leave a message with the hotline. If it's an emergency, obviously call the first responders, whether that's the sheriff or the fire. We will coordinate with both of those agencies on the following day when we receive a message. But there's also the point of contact person that the STR operator has to establish for those types of contacts. I hope that helps to answer your question.
And Paula, if I also can just say that the violation in the review of it is more probable than not standard. Is that right, Bill? I may have just mispronounced the standard, but I believe that is it.
Yeah, that's a standard, a burden of proof in civil proceedings, more probable than not.
And so if you cannot reach them because it's after hours or on the weekend, photos, videos, etc. Again, please don't escalate the situation. Please don't go onto the property, but certainly your comments, your testimony, if you will, in the complaint, as well as any information that you may have, certainly will be considered by community development when they're investigating the complaint.
Thank you.
Thank you. And other comments, questions, members of the public?
Chair Horseman, I do have Amelia Moore with the hand up. I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak. If you can please unmute yourself, state your name and address for the record, and then I will count the clock for 3 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, Camilla, please.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
We can, perfect.
All right, my name is Camelia Moore. I live at 13135 East Fallow Deer Road in Parks. And I just wanted to say thank you for adding that 5, the family limit definition is a helpful addition to this draft of the ordinance. That was something I was concerned about. And so to that end, I was wondering, is there anything in their listings that they will be required to put on the site that limits that to show that they're in compliance? And also my other question was about the 120-day grace period. I assume that's a temporary thing as this all comes on board. Is that correct?
That is what's being proposed, Camilla, exactly, 120-day grace period. So we can get out and really notify the public what this is about, answer public's questions, and really communicate what the ordinance says and what the requirements are. So that's that 120-day grace period. And the other one was, I apologize, I'm writing it down, but I missed it.
So basically, will there be any requirement for them to ensure that they,
that's right,
in their listing on Airbnb or VRBO, that they can't have more than 5 unrelated people, you know, like a couple other people on the call. I have a house next to me that houses up to 18, 16, 18 people. I'm just kind of curious if there's any kind of burden on the owners to ensure that they are keeping within the county zoning.
Yes. The good news is yes. And part of and we have this in the ordinance itself, is part of the registration process. Part of it is that attestation by the owner that the subject property use shall comply at all times with the residential purposes, and also that this is a single family residential and will not be used for non-residential purposes. Non-residential purposes include, as defined in here, special events and other commercial purposes that are not allowed as part of the short-term rental ordinance. So yes, it is included. The owner states that they in fact agree that they're in compliance with single-family residential position on this ordinance, and also that it's not being used for a non-residential purpose. That means a commercial purpose or a special event, which requires special permitting from the county. So, yes.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, of course, Matt.
Sure. But a clarification, it's not that it would be listed in their postings, their advertising. It's part of their permit that
That's right.
our chair just read. They are required to put their tax identification on their listings. So according to our ordinance here. There you go.
Thanks, you. Thanks for the clarification, Matt. So I hope that helps, Camilla.
Yes, great. Thank you. I really appreciate all your guys' work on this.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your comments this evening. So other comments?
And I do have Doug Meyer. Doug, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak. If you can please unmute yourself, state your name and address for the record. I will start the clock for 3 minutes after that.
Hi, I'm Doug Meyer, 8810 Stardust Trail. And my question is a technical one regarding the definition of a multifamily transient stay, which is under the limitation of use, non-residential purposes. I'm wondering whether a large wedding reception would be a multifamily transient stay, or would it be, would they be able to say, well, we are all members of the same family, any number of individuals related by blood, marriage, affinity, or legal adoption. So how are we going to deal with a large wedding reception? That's my question. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your comments, Doug. And I'm going to turn this over to our county attorney on special events.
Well, I thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate Doug's review of the ordinance and the technical review of the language, because quite frankly, as lawyers, that's where we go. We take a look at the definitions and we try to identify, you know, what it is that we mean. We do have definition of transient, and we also, Jay, you can help me out with this one, but we also distinguish special uses from single family dwelling uses, and special uses that would require a permit don't become permitted uses just because they happen at an Airbnb. In fact, special events require their own permit. In the absence of that permit, the use is prohibited. So we have mechanisms of enforcement that go beyond the short-term rental ordinance to address particular instances, such as special events. And I'm not really sure, Jay, I mean, I'm thinking hypothetically, but I'm not really sure, Jay, if we have, say, a multifamily units out there where every unit is devoted to short-term rental and they're clustered in a single structure, and in some way they can, you know, evade the intent of this ordinance by having a multifamily structure serve as a family gathering place. I think that's so hyper technical that it's really going to spin around on the facts of the case when we face an enforcement of the ordinance and we're met with a defense that tries to shoehorn multifamily residences as some exception to short-term rental regulation.
And yeah, Madam Chair and County Attorney Ring, I'm not aware of any multifamily unit in the county. We don't have a lot. There's a handful in Kachina Village, and there are a number of them in the Greenhaven area, but I'm not aware of any complaint that came in about an event at one of those units.
Any other comments? Doug, thanks for joining us. I hope this has helped.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
And that is all the hand. There are no more hands raised.
All right.
So again, if there's anyone that would like to make a comment, you can hit the raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen, and that will raise your hand and notify us you'd like to speak. If you've joined by telephone, you can hit *9, and that will raise your hand and notify us that you would like to speak.
The members of the public, we're coming to the conclusion here, closing our public hearing. So I'm going to give it just a few more moments. And please join us if you have comments or concerns. We've really appreciated hearing from members of the public who have joined us. And as I said, we have received written comments, which we have reviewed, which will be part of our record. And so now is the time.
I do have Brian with a hand up. Brian, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak. If you can please state your name and address for the record, I will then start the 3-minute clock. You just need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Awesome. Brian at 2435 East Mustang Road. I appreciate you having this meeting.
Oops, we've lost you.
In Coconino County. And I'm looking forward to working together to figure this out. I think I rent mine out about half the time. I use it about half the time. And my question, because my phone died when someone else had asked, how are we working together to make sure the complaints are legitimate? What kind of investigation will be going on, whether that complaint happens while I'm living there or if it's one of my renters, which I'm all for having a very strict policy myself when it comes to people renting the place. Like, I don't even allow pets in my place just because of the liability. And I keep my occupancy pretty low. I don't want any damages. So how are those complaints being resolved, or how do I get contacted, and how quickly is it being investigated so that I can help? Because I don't want those people that are violating the policies to be there as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. And we did address that a little earlier, but I'm going to ask Jay to address that again. And you're right. We really appreciate hearing from you as a short-term rental owner, making it very clear you don't want that going on in your unit as well. And as I said, I think this is going to be very helpful to set standards for not only owners, but quite frankly, for people who come up here and use our short-term rental and use your units. So hopefully it sets standards for everybody. So
and my only little follow-up with that before you guys get given a chance to answer the part is, like, even if I've called the police if I see something going on, am I calling on myself, right? Do I get a violation ding for that? Anyway, go ahead. Thank you.
Yes, that's a great question too. And I'm going to turn this over to Jay and Mark. And I might want to give I know you've gone into greater detail, but kind of give just a brief overview on this.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Brian, thank you for the comments. So yeah, if you're the operator, you can list yourself as the emergency point of contact, and that will help you manage those complaints much better than if you had a third party do it, or in many cases, a third party that's not even in our area. So does that help to answer your question? I think you kind of answered your own question.
I just didn't know how fast it worked, you know, where if somebody's having a party or the neighbors decide to complain, how quickly does that get to me for like the next day where I
Gotcha.
go, okay. It happened, 12 hours ago. I can look at the cameras if that complaint is legitimate or not. And I didn't want that to happen either. Now I'm dinged and I have two more, and this is kind of a semi-livelihood. So, I'm a little bit worried on how this is going to all unfold.
Uh-huh.
And Jay, before you answer that, just one thing to point out, Brian, is that you will have, first, your neighbors will have contact information. And, one of the things that we will, as part of our outreach to the community, is encourage folks to neighbors to contact that person who's listed as the contact person. Sometimes just a quick phone call to the owner of the short-term rental is going to result in immediate compliance, because as the owner, you can call those, you can get a hold of the person who's renting it, make it very clear that they're going to need to come into compliance and they're going to need to shape up quickly, or they may be out on the street. And as the owner of that short-term rental, you have the authority to do that, where obviously we don't. So that's number one. And we hope the contact and providing emergency contact information will help in just, quite frankly, self-correcting. And that would be our intent. So with that, Jay, any other follow-up?
Nope, I think that was a perfect summary. Yeah, you're your own enforcement agency. That's kind of ideal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for joining us tonight. All right. Any other comments, questions from the public?
Okay, there are no hands raised at this time.
Very good. And I just want to again thank members of the public for joining us this evening. We appreciate your time in reading the ordinance. We're very excited about the ordinance, and there's been a lot of work that's gone into this from the board, the county attorney's office, our staff, Jay, Mark, our county management staff. This has been an all-out effort to try to do the best we can for our residents with limitations we have with the state laws. So we're very excited about it. And if there's no one else to be heard, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing portion of our short-term rental hearing tonight. And I am now going to ask the board members if they have any comments or questions. And I'd like to hear from you on the recommendation from staff to have a 120-day time period to start enforcement, and also for the 72-hour turnaround for a complaint. Obviously, if it's an emergency, it's going to be an immediate turnaround. So those are recommendations of staff, and I'd like to hear from the board members on their feelings on that. So with that, members of the board, I'm going to open this up. Anybody want to go first?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, let's go vice chair, and then we'll go Matt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. First off, I just want to say thank you to all the citizens that contributed to the conversation, gave us their thoughts and input on this ordinance that we're trying to put in. One thing that I heard through and through again, both in the comments that were given previously and leading up to tonight, is the desire for this to have some teeth, for this ordinance to actually be able to have some teeth and enforcement. And so I I feel like I have a good idea of the enforcement, but I would like to see if Jay, if your office could just recap why this ordinance has more enforcement than the previous ordinance that we originally were looking at and took a step back to change for this ordinance. Could you clarify that for folks, please? Or County Attorney Ring, whoever would prefer to answer that.
Madam Chair and Vice Chair Vasquez, thank you for the question. Bill, if I missed anything, please fill it in. So the difference between this ordinance and our previous draft with the enforcement is specifically for failure to register. The suspension and revocation process is the same. That has to go through a hearing officer. However, our County Attorney Ring really helped us to streamline the enforcement capabilities for failure to obtain a permit. So there's those number of elements that, providing the TPT number, notifying your neighbors and letting us know that. I can't remember the other provisions off the top of my head, but it was all the things that you need to do to register to obtain the permit. If they fail to do that within 30 days, we can immediately cite them. $500 first offense, and that goes straight through the court system. So it's essentially a ticket. It's a fine. That provision to make somebody obtain that permit within 30 days was not in the previous draft of our ordinance. County Attorney Ring, if I left anything out, please, feel free to interject.
Thank you, Jay and Supervisor Vasquez. I mean, it's a good question. One of the things that we did was to distinguish, in a sense, the good actors from the bad actors, right? And so we put an emphasis upon registration. And good actors will voluntarily comply with the ordinance if they have prior notice, which is why the department is recommending a 120-day implementation period. We expect to receive a large number of registrants of people who want to comply. And so we made that more clear in this version of the ordinance. The second thing we made more streamlined was the enforcement, so that the failure to register constitutes a verified offense. And we don't need a large body of due process in front of a hearing officer to determine that a person did not register their unit. So we streamlined the enforcement. At the same time, we emphasized due process and enforcement for those most severe violations that don't involve registration, but actually involve those types of violations that we've heard the public comment on in the last hour and a half. The third thing we did was we really emphasized that this is about family matters, if you will. When we have single family residential zones, that means something to us. It means that it's a dwelling unit for a single family. And we've heard the public comment on how single family homes become overburdened by multifamily uses. And that overburden is not only, the capacity of the house, but it's the noise and the nuisance and the types of things that you don't anticipate in single family neighborhoods. And so that's what we really tried to address the enforcement mechanisms, was on this expectation that a single family home is supposed to function and appear and operate and behave like a single family home. When it doesn't, because it's in the industry of Airbnb, we have an enforcement opportunity. And those were the major changes from the prior ordinance. In my view, the prior ordinance contained a cumbersome route to a final adjudication of a violation. And we tried to just simply make that more clear and easier for the public to understand and for the department to implement.
Great. Thank you for that explanation. I really appreciate it. I do have a follow-up question. And that was one of the comments earlier was asking about why we went with the $250 registration fee at the maximum allowed. And so my question is it possible to lower it some while still covering our enforcement? I know that we have to charge to be able to cover our code enforcement. So I'm just curious if 250 is what we need to charge in order to cover enforcement needs. Thank you.
And I
Jay?
know if I can, and Jay, you might be able to more clearly answer this, but we are and we did hire another enforcement officer to enforce primarily this. And so it really is a matter of covering our expenses. We cannot use it for anything more than covering the cost of enforcement and our expenses to implement this. Is that correct, Jay?
Madam Chair, that's correct. So we're recruiting. We haven't hired yet, but we hope to soon. But we did recruit the full-time admin specialist, so that's part of it as well. And we actually did already adopt the fee. It went into effect 60 days after the February hearing. But yeah, we did a thorough analysis, and given the broad range of where short-term rentals are located in the county, it might take 20 minutes to get to one. It might take 3 hours to get to another. So there's a lot that goes into that.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. I just want to make sure that we address it so the public understands why we had to go with the $250 registration fee. It's actually to cover the salary of this new code enforcer that we will be putting in place to deal with this ordinance. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Vasquez. Other comments from members of the board? And Vice Chair, I'm assuming that you have no objection to the 120 days implementation and using a 72-hour turnaround for a complaint. Are you in favor of that?
Yes, I am. I would prefer to see it sooner, but I understand the need for 120 days to get all our ducks in a row. So I'm perfectly fine with 120 days. Thank you.
And the 72-hour turnaround?
72-hour turnaround is fine.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. All right. Other comments, questions? Yes, Matt.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, I want to get into a little discussion on the 72 hour, but let me go through, what we have first on this. Just quickly, another thing of note. Now, I'm glad Geronimo asked about the $250. And for the sake of, Chris, I know you brought it to my attention. You brought it up today. What we do, and as noted by Patrice, we're not here to make money. We're here to pay for the cost of what's going on. The fee itself will be analyzed, and we do it on every 2-year cycle that we actually evaluate. Are we receiving the amount that we needed associated with a particular fee, or are we overcharging? If we are overcharging, we modify the fee, but we have a method of analysis that we go through. But you also heard Jay in explaining why we set the current amount associated with that. And that's, it's not just for your comments, Chris, but for others that have asked about that, what we're trying to do and how we establish that. So a lot more went into it. It wasn't just arbitrary decision. Oh, the high amount, let's go for the high amount on that. So we are trying to really just be practical about how we're approaching this. I scanned through the comments that we've received in the book, that people that submitted. One of them wanted us to apply this in the city of Williams, just noting, and it had been noted earlier in the meeting. We can't do that. That's city jurisdiction. They have to apply their own ordinance. And they do have an ordinance in Williams. If they choose to match ours, it'll make them more consistent, but they have their reasons for how they have gone about establishing their ordinance. And that's true for all the other municipalities. And similar discussion that we had related to Navajo Nation that Bill answered earlier. That was one peak. Somebody asked in the comments, and it's been repeated over and over, there is a requirement for a contact person, and that neighbors that are adjacent, the owners need to provide that contact information to those owners. Enforcement came up repetitively. I think we've answered that we can't be all things, but we're trying to implement a process where we have a tool that over time will become more and more effective, and will lessen the need for enforcement if we have good behavior associated with this. Reason we have a jail is not because of the good people that are in the community, and I don't mean to use the jail as an example for short-term rentals, but it's more of a metaphor, in that that's why we're creating an ordinance based on the behavior we've seen as a result of the new statute that the state created a few years ago. And I think we're trying to be very practical about what we're doing. You can hear we've had consultation through our legal, through our community development. We listen to people's comments, we've readjusted, and that's what we're trying to do. And so part of what I'm laying out here is for the sake of people, I support the intent of the ordinance here. We tried very hard to get a tool. We now have the opportunity to create a tool. I think, I got to compliment Bill Ring along with the county staff, not just community development, but the sheriff's office. But Bill, I see this as your swan song. This is a piece of very good work on the legal side of what has been written. And then we try and implement the tool. And if it's not perfect, we always have an opportunity to come back and say, okay, this isn't working. Let's modify. Let's see what we can do. So those are areas of consideration as we work through it. But first, we need to implement. And try as we may, we want to have a seamless process, but not everything always works the right way in the beginning. And we're going to try as best we can to just to work toward a seamless process for this. I think, as I went through a lot of the comments, the one that came up over and over is, can we do this? Can we do that? That goes beyond the statutory limits that have been provided by the legislature. Try as we may, we can't. But as we hear about this and see how we implement it, if there's a time that we have to reconsider approaching the legislature, we do. But hopefully we have the tool that'll work for us. And we get people that start to, once they know that we have a tool out there, we have an enforcement mechanism, it starts to bring those that are kind of loose on their compliance into compliance. So that would be good. There's the education factor that we're working on. So I fully support the 128-day piece. To be honest with you, I liked how it was written before. Within reason, staff can set that limit as 72 hours. And you may not agree with me, but they can set that limit as 72 hours. That's their process that they use on it. Once you write it into the ordinance, it's also a tool to be used in, draconian way for those that want to use it to be aggressive towards their neighbors, that kind of thing. And so, you do have absentee owners. There's a reason why we want that in there. We need them to come in, respond in a very thrifty method. So I'm a little not as big on writing the additional 72 hours in there. So there are the pieces I have. Just, one other is, and we've noted, we've created an ordinance before the state ever wrote a statute on this. We were proactive. We had a very good ordinance that was local control, and we were beginning to implement. And then we had the state step in, the governor, former governor, working together with the legislature to create this tool. The neat thing about the tool is now that we're getting this opportunity to bring an enforcement mechanism in, for those that are using this as a mechanism for their livelihood, we've seen the benefit. We understand it. We just need to maintain residential zoning, and that's what I think you have done a great job of writing into this bill. It brings us back to having residential zoning and use it zoning as the mechanism for your process. So I surely appreciate that. So just wanted to provide more of the background leading into my decision associated with this. I do support what we're doing here, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. And you can live with the 72 hours instead of just reasonable?
Well, I like, this is part of why we have a board and we get into a discussion on
That's
it.
why I'm
Yeah.
asking, can you
Yeah.
live with the 72 hours?
Madam Chair, I want to hear from the other board members, not just, hey, we have it up here now. Do you want to do it? We want to do it. Let's hear it. Everybody wants to go in that way, so be it. But if there are those that feel reasonable is there and staff uses that as their criteria, we don't have to write it in there, Madam Chair.
All right, any other comments, questions, members of the board? Supervisor Begay.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to speak this evening. And I just wanted to thank the staff and also Mr. Ring and also, of course, Jay Krisselman and everyone that has called in to be part of this process. And certainly we need to include our constituents, regarding any of the issues that come to the board that we need to consider. In this case, it's the ordinance that we are talking about. So certainly we need to ensure that there's compliance by regulation enforcement to ensure safety and to be just like good neighbors to one another. So I totally support that. And also, even though we have limitations per statute of 1168, we as board members are trying our best to address concerns that come to us, in various aspects of, in this case, again, it's the ordinance that's come to our attention. Possibly the owner, I'm thinking that a lot of the three board members that some board members have already talked about their issues and some of their input that they provided. I'm not going to reiterate that, but I'm just going through what I would like to say also outside that hasn't been mentioned. Maybe there's a way that people that own the short-term rentals may be able to consider or even include in the ordinance and any of the lease agreements that they have with the people that are going to be renting the short-term rentals, and to be in compliance. So that would be where they would step in and make sure that they're fully aware and things like that. So I just wanted to say that certainly the ordinance will most likely be going into effect on 11/14/23. And certainly we also may be able to modify the ordinance as we go along, but certainly, there was a lot of work that was put in there by the staff and everyone else, and with the input of all the people that have brought in forth, emails, and those are things that we had to consider. And I do agree with the 120-day implementation period. I believe that that's enough time for everyone to, come in and address to get their documents implemented and submitted. And then the 72 hours complaint turnaround, I also agree with that. So, and again, this is not the first time we're talking about this. We've had, various times where the board was involved in input, and then we also now are involving the community members. So I just want to thank everyone again. I think we really it's going to work for us, and I feel confident that that's a way of helping people that have been faced with basically some of the things that are happening in their areas. But I just think that this is our input, and I just want to say thank you again to everyone that has spoke to this issue, and then also what the board's going to be considering and how we're going to be voting on this. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Supervisor Begay. And I'm going to see if Supervisor Fowler has some comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Short-term rentals has it's very good for families to be able to provide a service and to help their family. And that was the intent of short-term rentals. But what we've seen in our county and throughout Arizona is we've even seen corporations buy houses or whole apartments. And we have as a result, partly part of it is that it causes housing shortages. So I'm really happy that this ordinance was put together as the way that it came, input from the community, and really looking at how other jurisdictions have written their short-term rentals, but really hearing it from our own residents and wanting to and saying that this is what should be in there, and just like tonight's comments, those are really, really important. So I'm just really supportive of this short-term rental. I'm really happy that it's going to be we will be able to adopt it tonight. Now, I do have a question. The public education, not everybody listens to our board meetings. So I'm just wondering, how are we going to make sure that all homeowners have this? And I was just wondering if the plan is to be able to mail it to all the homeowners, or send it out with the tax statements. How is that going to be handled? What kind of education is going to be set out there?
Thank you, Supervisor Fowler. And I think that there hasn't been, that I have heard, but we can hear from Andy, that the cost of sending that out to every resident would probably exceed our budget. But I do know that besides on the website, besides on public forums and social media, there will be the trifold going out, as I understand it, to the HOAs, even though they are not really part of it, but they can certainly get the message out to the communities, as well as the newspaper has been very good. I know CAF Radio, and I'll be addressing CAF Radio on Friday, and I'm sure other of us will be reaching out to the public and to media channels to try to provide this additional information. Anything else, Andy, you can talk about, or Jay, on public outreach?
Yeah, Chair Horstman, thank you. And you hit the high points. I think, Andy Bertelson, Deputy County Manager, we have several of our community groups are very interested in this short-term rental ordinance, particularly in Pinewood, Munns Park, Kachina Mountain Air, et cetera. And so we're utilizing those community group meetings, as well as social media, and the local papers as well, are interested in the ordinance and are helping us get the word out. Also, as we get, as neighbors might let us know that they're in their neighborhood is a short-term rental, we will proactively, as staff, ensure that those folks are getting the appropriate permits for those short-term rentals as they're in the neighborhoods. And Jay, correct me if I'm missing anything. I know we had a media blitz, so to speak, with this short-term rental ordinance, and once we with that grace period especially, that will really give us time to get everyone appropriately registered.
Yep, thank you. Thank you. Supervisor Fowler, any other comments on that? Otherwise, I'm going to make some comments too before we close. So any other comments you might have on public outreach, or other comments on the ordinance?
Not on the public outreach. So thank you. I just figured that, it is always very costly. So I think what we're doing is good. We just have to, state legislators, they've given us a small window of opportunity to be able to exercise our own authority to make sure that the public is safe. And that's what this is all about, is public safety, making sure there's some guidelines that are there. So thank you so much. And I want to thank everyone that's been working on this, and really has been a team effort. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Fowler, and I'll just make some comments and if there's some follow-up, otherwise we'd entertain a motion. But first and foremost, thank you, community, from hearing from you this time. And when we also heard from you back in February for our first hearing, this has been a team effort. It's been a pleasure to work closely with County Attorney's Office on this ordinance. And really appreciate their thinking outside the box to address our concerns on things such as being sure we had proper definitions and understood an expedited enforcement process was very, very important, and trying to make this consistent with a single family residential neighborhood. So to our staff, to the County Attorney's Office, to all that have worked on this, I'm very, very proud of this ordinance. It's been a long time coming for many of our neighborhoods in the unincorporated parts of Coconino County. As you've heard, really until 2022, we really were not able to do any regulation or oversight on our short-term rental here in our communities. And this created a largely unregulated commercial short-term rental industry. And unfortunately, this was in a single family, quiet residential neighborhoods. And unfortunately, there were some bad actors who basically, instead of being good neighbors, in fact, violated the neighborhood, violated the peace and quiet of the others who live there. I think we all can say we believe in personal property and personal property rights, but when these personal property rights interfered with the neighbors' quiet enjoyment and their personal property rights, it caused concerns for all of us. When the legislature allowed us a brief window, a brief opportunity to do some regulations, we started working, as I said, with county attorney, with our county manager's office. The board was very involved in this drafting of the ordinance. We also had outreach to the city of Flagstaff, city of Williams, city of Sedona, and others, because we wanted to have an ordinance that was reflective of what our incorporated municipalities were in fact doing. We didn't want to confuse the public. So trying to have some continuity and consistency and still recognize there were uniqueness to non-incorporated or unincorporated areas that we needed to address. But we think we've done that. And I believe the ordinance is before us is a good combination of what we are entitled and able to do under the law, and is consistent and complementary to what our municipalities are doing with their short-term rental ordinances. And we appreciate, again, the input from the public and from everybody who was here tonight. I'm especially proud of the fact that we do put this under our zoning ordinance. So it is part of a single family residence definition, which I think is extremely important. Just like I think it's very important to have a meaningful ordinance, means we have to enforce it, and we need to have an expedited enforcement procedure. And I think this ordinance does exactly that. And like many of my colleagues here, I do not have a problem with 120 days. I would like to get this moving forward as well, but I don't have a problem with 120 days to get this moving forward. We have a big outreach that we need to do to our community, and I think this will give us the time to be able to do that. In terms of the 72 hours, I wish I could just say, hey, just whatever is reasonable. But unfortunately, given my background as a lawyer, I have seen what's reasonable to one person is not necessarily reasonable for another. So I do appreciate the 72 hours, even though I wish we could keep it a little broader, but I just don't think that's appropriate. I think it may be appropriate. I just think it could cause more problems than it would alleviate. And so for that, I do agree with the 72-hour period. And I'm hearing a consensus, which is good, from the board on both 120 days and the 72 hours. So again, a big thank you to our community, big thank you to our municipalities that have joined us in this, a big thank you to my colleagues, and certainly the county staff that has been so involved in this, and the county attorney. And this can't be your swan song, because I'm still looking to you, county attorney, to help us for a long time to come. And I really appreciate your thinking outside the box and your wonderful creative input in this. So thank you so much. So any other final comments, or I would entertain a motion. We have before us, we've had our public hearing. We have before us a possible action to adopt ordinance 2023-04, a short-term rental ordinance that would apply to the unincorporated parts of Coconino County. And Supervisor Ryan, I'm turning this to you.
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt ordinance 2023-04, and that is adopting that short-term rental ordinance for unincorporated Coconino County. We get feedback.
Yes, Supervisor Begay, you may want to mute. Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry, Supervisor Ryan.
With amendments, and one amendment would be that we extend an 120-day grace period for people to obtain permits. And the second amendment, and might need a little help on the wording, it would be a response from the owner or their designee of within 72 hours placed in the appropriate place in the ordinance. That's the piece I can't find, is where that is in the ordinance. Do we need to modify that any?
I believe that would be an amendment as well to define reasonable as 72.
Yeah, that would be the second amendment. Mm-hmm.
Very good. So we have a motion by Supervisor Ryan to accept the ordinance 2023-04 with two amendments. And Supervisor Ryan, as I understood it, you agreed to include in that amendment the 120 days starting for the enforcement period for the new ordinance. And number two, to define the turnaround as reasonable for any complaints as reasonable within 72 hours. Is that correct?
Yes, with grudgingly on the second one, but yes, Madam Chair.
I second the motion.
We have a motion by Supervisor Ryan with the two amendments, and we have a second of the motion with those two amendments by Supervisor Begay. Members of the board, this is our short-term rental ordinance before you. Can I ask all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any objections? It is unanimous. Members of the board, members of the public, Coconino County has adopted a short-term rental ordinance for the unincorporated parts of Coconino County. We look forward to working with the public to provide outreach on our short-term rental ordinance. And we are looking for, of course, voluntary compliance, and really for this being just a codification of being good neighbors. So thank you, and thank you, members of the public, for this, and our great staff and our great county attorney's office and my colleagues. This is very good. This has been a good day.
Many years in coming. Good, well done. Yes.
It's been a very good day.
Yes.
So any other comments or questions or closing remarks from members of the board?
Madam Chair, thank you to all the staff that worked on this, to everybody, and to the board. It has been years in coming, and really appreciate it. And it has been a good day. Start with the National Monument, now step into this ordinance. That's wonderful.
Yes, it's been a very good day. These projects take a long time, and they slowly come together, and just slowly legislators are slow, so we just are going to continue to work with them. And same thing with the National Monument. The National Monument, it's been over 20 years that we've been working on that. The Board of Supervisors, past Board of Supervisors, to this supervisors, and it's finally come about. So very happy, and I know the former Board of Supervisors are very pleased with today's event. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Fowler. I certainly hope our whole community is really happy about this event. And I know so many people throughout Coconino County have been so involved in the protection of the Grand Canyon and this, which culminated in this monument. So great day. So any other concluding remarks? Otherwise, members of the board, I just have to say it's been my great pleasure to serve as your chair. I know in the next board meeting, we will have a vote for a new chair and a new vice chair. And I just want to tell you what a great job you all have done to help me during this process. And it has been my great pleasure to be your chair. I look forward to new leadership here on the board and just so appreciate my colleagues. So thank you very much. So with that, it's my honor to say we are adjourned. It's been a long, great day. Have a great night. And thank you all very much. Be safe.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.